Burkina Faso moves to block unauthorized study abroad, requiring government approval for overseas education. Now, this is what Burkina Faso is doing. In other words, when you leave Burkina Faso to go to the colonizers' countries and enslavers' countries for an education, you're going to learn something that you can use to develop Burkina Faso and to free it from Western control. That's what the statement means. Burkina Faso has introduced a new requirement compelling all students seeking to pursue higher education abroad to obtain prior authorization from the Ministry of Higher Education, marking the latest step in the country's broader effort to bring education more closely in line with the priorities of its military-led government. So when you go to France and America to get an education, you're not going to be learning a bunch of rubbish that Burkina Faso cannot use to develop. Burkina Faso now requires all students seeking higher education abroad to obtain prior authorization from the Ministry of Higher Education. Now, what it means is that it doesn't matter whether or not the government is paying for it or you are paying for it out of your pockets. If the government don't like it, you're not going to go get it. The government says this measure is to align overseas academic training with national development priorities and improve labor marketing reintegration. In other words, when they go back to Burkina Faso, they have to know what to do to build the country up so that they can reintegrate properly into the country. The new policy adds an administrative layer for thousands of students, particularly those heading to popular destinations like France. It follows other reforms like a mandatory patriotic immersion program for new university students and the suspension of a major student union. So Burkina Faso had a student union. Now, why would anybody have a student union? What the hell for? Remember now, this major student union was formed when the colonizers ran the place. And you can bet anything the colonizer and enslaver let you do was of absolutely no benefit to you. The decree adopted during a council ministers meeting applies to all Burkina-based students intending to begin studies overseas, regardless of whether they are financed through government scholarship, private sponsorship, or personal funds. In other words, it doesn't matter who the hell is paying for it. You're going to learn what the government tells you to learn. According to the government, the measure is designed to enable the state to monitor academic training undertaken abroad, ensure it aligns with the country's current development vision, reduce potential social challenges after students return home and improve their eventual integration into the domestic labor market. See, the purpose of the government letting you go overseas to learn something is not for you to become a U.S. citizen. It's not for you to be a French citizen. It's not for you to go over there and fuck women. You go there to learn something to bring back to Burkina Faso and develop the place. The new policy introduces an additional administrative layer for thousands of Burkina Faso students who each year seek opportunities at universities outside the country. This is very interesting. See, because what you're listening to, right, is where the house niggas come from. They go to these colleges and universities overseas and come back more patriotic to the Western countries. Do you really believe that Western education is going to make Burkina Faso people more patriotic to Burkina Faso? Of course it's not. This is why the government is cracking down on what you learn when you go over there. France remains one of the most popular destinations, with Campus France reporting that about 2,500 Burkina Faso students were enrolled in French higher education institutions in 2022. So I see there, Burkina Faso's people have been going to the colonizer for the education. Now you know where the race traitors and house niggas come from. A broader shift in education policy. The new decree is the latest in a series of reforms that have expanded the Burkina Faso state role in shaping higher education under the country's transition authorities. Now, the article continues, but I'm going to read the rest of it. The point I'm trying to make is that the Burkina Faso government has decided that when you go overseas to learn in the colonizer education system, you're not going to come back and be a goddamn traitor. You're going to learn something that you can use to build up Burkina Faso, and that's how you run a nation. That is what a responsible government does.